Okay, so I am doing my other chapter of the epic reading. I decided to film this outside to share with you the nature of my backyard. I'm just gonna claim it's a Forks-like setting. And yeah, there's no real reason. It's actually really cold out here. Anyway, so Chapter 3 of New Moon is called The End. Oh, yeah, okay. I felt absolutely hideous in the morning. I hadn't slept well. My arm burned and my head ached. It didn't help my outlook that Edward's face was smooth and remote as he kissed my forehead quickly and ducked out my window. I was afraid of the time I'd spent unconscious, afraid that he might have been thinking about right and wrong again while he watched me sleep. The anxiety seemed to ratchet up the intensity of the pounding in my head. Edward was waiting for me at school as usual, but his face was still wrong. There was something buried in his eyes that I couldn't be sure of, and it scared me. I didn't want to bring it up last night, but I wasn't sure if avoiding the subject could be worse. He opened the door for me. "How do you feel?" "Perfect," I lied, cringing as the sound of the slamming door echoed in my head. We walked in silence, he shortening his stride to match mine. There were so many questions I wanted to ask, but most of those questions would have to wait, because they were for Alice. How was Jasper this morning? What had they said when I was gone? What had Rosalie said? And most importantly, what could she see happening now in her strange, imperfect visions of the future? Could she guess what Edward was thinking? Why he was so gloomy? Was there a foundation for the tenuous instinctive fears that I couldn't seem to shake? The morning passed slowly. I was impatient to see Alice, though I wouldn't be able to really talk to her with Edward there. Edward remained aloof. Occasionally he would ask about my arm, and I would lie. Alice usually beat us to lunch. She didn't have to keep pace with a sloth like me, but she wasn't at the table, waiting with a tray of food she wouldn't eat. Edward didn't say anything about her absence. I wondered to myself if her class was running late, until I saw Connor and Ben, who were in her 4th hour French class. "Where's Alice?" I asked Edward anxiously. He looked at the granola bar he was slowly pulverizing between his fingertips while he answered, "She's with Jasper." "Is he okay?" "He's gone away for a while." "What? Where?" Edward shrugged. "Nowhere in particular." "And Alice too?" I said with quiet desperation. Of course, if Jasper needed her, she would go. "Yes, she'll be gone for a while." She was trying to convince him to go to Denali. Denali was where the other bands of unique vampires, good ones like the Cullens, lived. Tanya and her family. I'd heard of them now and again. Edward had run to them last winter when my arrival had made Forks difficult for him. Laurent, the most civilized member of the James Little coven, had gone there rather than siding with James against the Cullens. It made sense for Alice to encourage Jasper to go there. I swallowed, trying to dislodge the sudden lump in my throat. The guilt made my head bow and my shoulders slump. I'd run them out of their home, just like Rosalie and Emmett. I was a plague. Oh my god, she might actually be smart for once. "Is your arm bothering you?" Yes, solicitous. What? Oh, whatever. "Who cares about my stupid arm?" I muttered in disgust. He didn't answer, and I pulled my head down on the table. Okay. By the end of the day, the silence was becoming ridiculous. I didn't want to be the one to break it, but apparently that was my only choice if I ever wanted him to talk to me again. "You'll come over later tonight?" Okay. I asked as he walked me silently to my truck. He always came over. Later. It pleased me that he seemed surprised. I have to work. I had to trade with Mrs. Newton to get yesterday off. Oh, he murmured. So you'll come over when I'm home though, right? I hated that I suddenly felt unsure about this. If you want me to. I always want you, I reminded him, with perhaps a little more intensity than the conversation required. I expected he would laugh, or smile, or react somehow to my words. All right then, he said indifferently. He kissed my forehead again before he shut the door on me. Then he turned his back and loped gracefully towards his car. I was able to drive out of the parking lot before the panic really hit, but I was hyperventilating by the time I got to Newton's. He just needed time, I told myself. He would get over this. Maybe he was sad because his family was disappearing. But Alice and Jasper would come back soon, and Rosalie and Emmett too. If it would help, I would stay away from the big white house on the river. I'd never set foot there again. That didn't matter. I'd still see Alice at school. She would have to come back for school, right? And she was at my place all the time anyway. She wouldn't want to hurt Charlie's feelings by staying away. No doubt I would also run into Carlisle with regularity in the emergency room. After all, what had happened last night was nothing. Nothing had happened. So I fell down. That was the story of my life, bitch. Compared to last spring, it seemed especially unimportant. James had left me broken and nearly dead from loss of blood, and yet Edward had handled the interminable weeks in the hospital much better than this. Was it because this time it wasn't an enemy he'd had to protect me from? Because it was his brother? Okay. Maybe it would be better if he took me away rather than his family being scattered. I grew slightly less depressed as I considered all the uninterrupted alone time. If he could just last through the school year, Charlie wouldn't be able to object. We could go away to college, or pretend that's what we were doing, like Rosalie and Emmett this year. Surely Edward could wait a year. What was a year to an immortal? It didn't even seem like that much to me. I was able to talk myself into enough composure to handle getting out of the truck and walking to the store. Mike Newton had beaten me here today, and he smiled and waved when I came in. I grabbed my vest, nodding vaguely in his direction. I was still imagining pleasant scenarios that consisted of me running away with Edward to very exotic locales. Mike interrupted my fantasy. How was your birthday? Oh, I mumbled. I'm glad it was over. Mike looked at me from the corners of his eyes like I was crazy. Work dragged. I wanted to see Edward again, praying that he would be past the worst of this, whatever it was exactly, by the time I saw him again. It's nothing I told myself over and over and over and over. Everything will go back to normal. Oh my god. The relief I felt when I turned on the street and saw Edward's silver car parked in front of my house with an overwhelming heady thing. Blah, 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 cold pizza. Okay, no, seriously, oh, here we